Hey everybody, good to be back with you. Daniel here. Today we're talking about one vital question. The question is, does life have value? Does life have value? Now we want to talk about this today because how we answer this question, how you answer this question will affect how you approach many other topics, such as abortion, human trafficking, discrimination. So how you answer the question, does life have value, will determine how you approach these other topics. Now, you might be saying, Daniel, of course life has value, but then I want to ask you, why do you say that? I say it does, and I'll tell you a reason why in a minute, but I have to ask you, why do you say life has value? What is your grounding? What is your foundation to base humans having value? Since the dawn of Darwinian evolution, it's been taught that humanity is just a byproduct of evolutionary process by natural selection. Humanity is just material, like everything else in creation, and survival of the fittest rules the day. However, when an event or an evil happens, there's a chord that struck humanity that suggests there's something unique about humanity. We're not like everything else in creation. We stand apart. There's something unique, that we have value that's different than everything else. But why? Where does that value come from? Let me give you an example. Say someone gave me the task of watching over their goldfish while they're gone. Please don't ever do that, all right? And I'm like, okay, sounds good. But after a few days, I actually forget to feed the goldfish, and then eventually the goldfish dies, and the person comes back and they find the goldfish dead. They're going to respond. They're going to be very frustrated, obviously. They might want me to buy new goldfish for them. They're probably never going to trust me with any responsibility again to that nature. But that's going to kind of be the end of it, all right? Now, let's change the scenario just a little bit and say instead of a goldfish, I was given the responsibility of a child. Now, would your response be the same? Absolutely not. Why? Because we know there's something unique about us. There's something unique about humanity, that we stand apart and we're different than all other creation. Each and every human being has intrinsic value and worth. But where does it come from? Does it come from a Darwinian evolution? No, that gives no grounding for it. Does it come from our job? Well, our job, we can feel like purposeful in our job, but it can't give us value and dignity. Because if we lose our job or when we retire, then do we now lose our value and dignity? So it can't come from our job. That's not a grounding to base our value and dignity. Now, does it come from how we look? Well, we're obviously going to look differently the older we get. Or what if someone doesn't fit the mold of what we say, this is what it got to look like? That can't be the basis of value and dignity. Or is value and dignity just a human invention? If it's just a human invention to survive, then that means it's just kind of made up and there's no basis for it, and you could just toss it out if you want. The same goes for relationships or possessions or money or accomplishments. Like, the basis for value and dignity can't be in any of these, because if we lose these, which we might lose a relationship, we might go bankrupt or lose some money, our possessions, our accomplishments, then we would say that we lose our value and dignity, but we do not. You could lose all your money but still have value. You could lose your job but still have value. You could lose a relationship but still have value. So what is the basis or grounding of our value and dignity? It cannot be in any of these other things. The reality is, our value and dignity as humans is an intrinsic part of who we are. It's not based, as I mentioned, in anything we have or do. If we are rich or poor, the rich person and the poor person have just as much intrinsic value. Now, you don't get that, and you cannot get that from an atheistic worldview, from an evolutionary mindset. Because to them, in that worldview, we're a byproduct of evolution, as I've already mentioned. And as a byproduct of evolution, we're just here by chance, all right? We just evolved over time. And we don't actually have any intrinsic value and worth. Therefore, if you're here or not here, in their worldview, really there is no difference. But we know that we have intrinsic value and worth. We know that there's a difference between us and a goldfish. There's a difference in value and dignity. Well, how do we determine where value comes from or how much value something has? Let me give you an example. A car has value. But where does the value come from? The car itself does not determine its value. It's not like the car said, this is how much I'm worth. No, the company, our creator, determines the value of the car. In other words, someone outside of the actual object, someone outside of the actual car, determines and sets the value of that object, that car. This is the same with humanity. We have intrinsic value and worth. And since we cannot make it ourselves, and Darwinian evolution fails to give us any answers or any sense to value, we need to look outside of ourselves and see, hey, where does that come from? It comes from the one who created us. You see this in the Bible, right in the beginning. Genesis 1, when God created humanity, it talks about God made humanity in his image. In his image. You can look all through Scripture. God created humanity with intrinsic value and worth. When he created us, he instilled in us value and worth. That we are now his image bearers. He is the source and not us. Not our skills, our abilities, or our connections, our money. That doesn't give us value. What gives us value is that we're created by God in his image. No matter how old you are, how young you are, your skin color, if you're in the womb or out of the womb, every single human life has value and dignity because it's created by God and he created us in his image. Dr. Jim Garlow stated this: committing violent crimes against someone reveals a profound disregard for human life and dignity. Whether these crimes are a result of hatred or prejudice, the result is the same: a violation against a being created in the image of God. If, however, we're saying value and dignity doesn't come from God, then we say, well, it comes from a construct to society, or a matter of what you look like, or what you have, or what you do. If these are the things we say, then value and dignity is completely subjective and means nothing. It means that it's a matter of opinion or preference, meaning either personal or society. But the reality is, value and dignity, of the intrinsic value and dignity of humanity, is not a preference or subjective, but is an objective reality. If we're saying value and dignity is intrinsic to all people, we're stating that it's objective. By objective, we mean that it's true, and that truth is not based on someone's thinking or their feeling. It's based in reality, how things really are. Like their disagreement, someone's disagreement doesn't change that fact. So I'm arguing, showing that humanity's value and dignity is objective, has to come from outside of us. This means that God is the only source of our value and dignity. And this is why Christians have fought against anything that tries to destroy or mar the image of God in people, such as slavery, murder, rape, abortion, human trafficking, the list goes on. Paul Copeland stated this: intrinsically valuable thinking persons do not come from impersonal, non-conscious, unguided, valueless process over time, i.e., atheism or evolution. A personal, self-aware, purposeful, good God provides a natural and necessary context for the existence of a valuable, right-bearing, moral, responsible human person. Now, why I want to talk about this today first is that so many questions or so many things are rooted in this question of, does life have value? How we answer the topic of abortion or euthanasia or human trafficking or many other questions are rooted in how we answer this question. Does life have value? Yes, it does. It comes from our God, our Creator, who created us in his image. Now, the problem we have often today is that people try to claim God does not exist, all right? Atheism, God doesn't exist. We're a byproduct of evolution. But then they try to steal from Christianity the humans are created in the image of God. You can't do that, all right? We're created in the image of God. Yes, that comes from Christianity. It does not come from you. Atheism gives no value to humans. In fact, there's absolutely no value or hope in atheistic worldview, all right? We are just randomly here, we have no meaning, and we'll disappear. That is atheistic worldview. So you cannot come from there and state that life has value, because you cannot get that from the atheistic worldview. That only comes from the Bible, comes from the Christian worldview, because we are created in the image of God. Now, when society or a person begins to lose this understanding that humanity is created in the image of God, what begins to happen is very dangerous, and we've seen it. What happens is we begin to put people on a scale and see if they measure up to what we or some society or some person determines what is actually valuable. They're like, this is what's valuable. If you measure up to this, then you have value and dignity. That's very dangerous because that's exactly what Hitler did. That's exactly what Stalin did. That's exactly what happened with slavery. That's what happened with abortion. That they're making this like if you can't speak or you don't look like this, then you don't have value and dignity. That is a lie. Our value and dignity does not come from our abilities, does not come from what we look like, does not come from our location as an inside or outside womb. Our value and dignity comes from the fact they're created in the image of God. And we know that. We know that. But that is rooted in Scripture. That's rooted in the very beginning, Genesis 1, humanity made in the image of God. So I want to end with this verse. This is in Psalm 139, verse 13. David writes this. He says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb." So the question, does life have value? 100%. All life has value and dignity. Human life has value and dignity, but that is rooted in the fact we're created in the image of God.